Hello and welcome everyone. On this video I will be teaching you how to use the color panel on Adobe Illustrator. You'll also learn how to use the RGB, CMYK and HSB sliders. So let's begin. First of all, let me tell you that the color panel is the panel that we have here on the top right of the screen. If this panel is condensed, as it is now, click on this little icon and choose Show Options. Okay, there we have it. I will demonstrate how the color sliders work by using these little squares that I have here. So let me begin with the RGB sliders. After that, we'll continue with the rest. For the sake of this tutorial, we won't be focusing on grayscale or web-safe RGB. We'll only be addressing the main three ones. Okay, so let's start with RGB. You're already familiar with it. You know that it stands for red, green and blue. And as you also already know, if we move all these sliders to the left, we get a pure white. And if we move them all to the far right, we get black. So each of these colors have a range that goes from 0 to 255. So if I were to choose a gray color as I am doing now, you'll notice that all of these sliders are more or less aligned. And this is no coincidence, because if you align all three sliders anywhere, you will get a gray color. If you do it more on the left, you will get a lighter gray, and if you do it on the right, you will get a darker gray. So have that in mind. Okay, so the good part of these RGB sliders is that we get to choose from the entire gamut of RGB, which is very wide, but the downside is that it's not the most intuitive approach. For example, as you can see, I'm moving the green slider, and all I'm doing is to add yellow to this color. And if I wanted to turn it green, I would have to move the red one. So of course this isn't a mistake. It has to do with the fact that these colors are being mixed as light, so it has its own logic, but it isn't very intuitive really. So all in all, you can count on the RGB sliders if you want to achieve a color that's brighter than what you can get from CMYK, but right now I'm going to leave this as a green and I'm going to move on to the next one that I'm going to teach you. Okay, moving on to the CMYK sliders, which you are also familiar with. It stands for cyan, magenta, yellow and black. As you can see, the sliders are aligned here too, and it forms a gray color, the same way as it happened on the RGB sliders. So let's try to create a green color that matches the one that we just did. But before that, let me demonstrate here that if you move all the sliders back to 0, of course you will get a white color, and if you move them all to 100%, you will get black. So going back to creating our green color, the good part of these CMYK sliders is that this is much more intuitive. It's like mixing ink. So if I wanted to come up with the green, I had to mix cyan and yellow, and it's all done. But of course this has a downside, which is that, if you can see, I can't really replicate the brightness of that green color that I just did with my RGB sliders with the CMYK sliders, because I'm limited to that color gamut, which, as you know, is smaller. And finally, the third approach would be using the HSB sliders. So what is HSB? Is this a different color space? Well, it isn't really. It stands for hue, saturation and brightness. And it's just a different approach to organizing colors, we could say. So let me show you how to use these sliders. So let's start by clarifying what is hue. Without getting too technical, the hue refers to the tint of this color, for example, red, green, blue, yellow, and so on. So when you think about hue, think of which color are we talking about. Is it a red, is it a green, a blue, and so on. So next one is saturation. Saturation is a property of any hue, of any color, which is how concentrated, how electric and powerful that color will be. So as you can see, this goes from 0 to 100. So if you dial back to 0, this color will have no saturation and it will be basically a gray color or a white color. If we use a color that's slightly saturated, let's say 50%, we get some sort of pastel color. And of course, if we move it to 100, we'll get a very pure, very concentrated and very saturated color. And last but not least, we have the brightness. This will indicate, well, how bright the color will be. If we dial it back to 0, the color will become a black color. If we move it to the middle, it will become a somehow dark version of that hue. And of course, if we move it to 100, it will be as bright as possible. Okay, so as you can see, I just created the green color, the same one we did with the RGB sliders with the HSB sliders. Later on this course, we will be using these 3 sliders to choose our colors and to modify them as well. So this is all for now. See you on the next video.